Welcome back to the Kyle Olson Show. Censorship has been raging this election season on Twitter and Facebook. And joining me now to discuss the free speech alternative to those is John Matze, CEO of Parler. John, thanks for joining me today.
Thank you for having me on.
So there were hearings on social media censorship in the U.S. Senate on Wednesday. What was your reaction to what took place?
Well, as usual with these hearings, I have mixed emotions because, our whole message behind Parler is to be a free town square for people to communicate openly. And anytime government kind of gets involved in these kind of private enterprises, it's a little bit troubling. For me, I don't know necessarily that government involvement is the answer, but I understand people's sentiment and why they're so concerned. And personally, I'm an advocate for market competition and competition in the marketplace in general.
But what happens when you've got these giants? And I tend to agree with you. But what happens when you've got these giants who can just, basically, wipe people out of existence, at least, digitally? How should that be handled?
Well, we did give them that power by choosing to use their platforms. The one thing that I found a little bit interesting about the conversations that a lot of these senators were having with Twitter, Facebook, and Google, it's interesting because only a few of them were actually on Parler and promoting alternatives, but all of them, even during the hearing, which I thought was interesting, were promoting Facebook and Twitter to watch their live streams. So it's really interesting that although they're having a lot of stern words, you don't really see them promoting the alternatives as much as they should. Senator Ted Cruz actually does a really good job of promoting Parler. He's very active on Parler as well. But really, everybody needs to set an example by choosing other places to go to. Because if you're going to continue to, basically try to force their hand, accept content they don't want to cater to, you're looking at nothing but regulation as the answer. And frankly, I think getting the government involved in online speech is going to be the death of free speech completely, not these tech companies.
Well, and it's been said that regulation by the government is actually good for these companies because then they can keep their competition sort of at bay. Is that how you see it?
Oh, 100%. Facebook's the biggest advocate for regulation. They're sitting there going, this will solve all of their problems. They'll no longer have to worry about startups, really, trying to compete with them. They don't really have to worry about antitrust anymore because they just got carte blanche, basically if regulation were there, they would get, basically a hands off from the government because they don't need to get involved for antitrust anymore. So in a way, they actually really want that. Instead of people complaining to Facebook, because one side, you have to remember, the left really wants more moderation and more burden on these websites, but the right doesn't want any. Right? They want less, and so for Facebook, regulation is the answer because they sit there and go, "Wow! Every time someone's complaining about people's speech on Facebook now, they can take it up with the House and the Senate." And they don't have to take it up with Facebook anymore. And that helps them because they also don't have to worry about ad bans or boycotts. So
right.
They would like regulation. And I'm really against it 100%. I don't trust the House or the Senate to create good, fair, and competitive rules for people online. And
So how does because there's been a lot of talk about repealing Section 230, and basically treating the Twitter and Facebook in particular as publishers versus platforms. How does that factor into regulation and that discussion?
So the beauty of Section 230 is that it protects neutral actors from liability. Now, I'm not a lawyer, I'm an engineer, and of course the founder of Parler, but as the founder, I like Section 230 immunity, especially for us, because we are a neutral town square. We don't weigh in on the content of the users. The users define not the users, but the people on the platform define their own experience. And so the problem with Section 230 is that Facebook and Twitter are already in violation of Section 230 because they're not neutral actors. They're acting as publishers. So it's kind of a weird situation where you don't really need to repeal something that's just being ignored, if that makes sense. I mean, if they were following the spirit of Section 230, they wouldn't be creating rules to kind of, kick out one ideologically, one ideological group, if that makes sense.
Sure. Interesting. So on Wednesday, in that Senate hearing, Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey said that they had no evidence that New York Post story on Hunter Biden and his laptop was the work of Russian disinformation. But the company censored it anyway, and Facebook did too. How did Parler handle that story?
We didn't handle it any different than we would handle any other content.
Right.
It wasn't censored. It wasn't limited. There was nothing going on with it. In terms of problems at Parler, we don't get involved, whether it's left-leaning content, right-leaning content, whatever it is, it's none of our business to be fact-checking or to be validating the authenticity of it. That's for the community to have a discussion about. That's what our First Amendment is for, right? People can have a discussion about it. Our biggest problem that we have when it comes to content is just spam. And that's all we do is keep track of spam in the comment section. So if people are spamming stuff, that's the only time we get involved. Otherwise, it's up to the people to have a conversation about whether it's valid, invalid, Russian, Chinese. I mean, it doesn't really matter.
Sure.
So
how would you, how do you think that those companies should handle that? I mean, obviously you're a free speech advocate and hands off and let people say what they want to say. But what do you think the motivation was behind those companies, clamping down and censoring and all of that to that particular story?
Well, I think they don't want to get blamed for some kind of news changing people's opinion in the last minute and being spread the last minute before an election and being spread on their platform, because they don't want to be blamed for having Donald Trump win again, like they blamed Facebook and Twitter in 2016. And so for them, I think as a company, they are trying to basically kind of put on the brakes of any content that might, persuade people last minute, change their opinion, which is why you see them not allowing new ads in the last minute. You see them saying that the president is not going to be allowed to declare victory on any platform online. And people are not allowed to speculate on Twitter or Facebook as to who they think might win the election or have won the election. And they're only allowing, quote unquote, as Orwellian as it sounds, they're only allowing authoritative sources to tell them who won the election. So this whole thing is them both kind of protecting Biden and the left from any scandals that might come up last minute, while also kind of basically placing all of the authority to determine who wins an election in a handful of media outlets who have been very biased, extremely biased in the last few years.
So for the average person, it's somebody that has 1,000 followers or, maybe just their family's following them or something. How should they react to that? Is it just simply leave the platform? Should there be some other response? How should that be handled?
Well, I think the first step is making sure everyone's aware this is happening. That's why we started Twexit.com and erasebook.info, so that people can learn about all of these different things in one place that these tech companies are doing to really hurt free speech online. And the second step, in my opinion, is to join a platform such as Parler that is promoting free speech and to dump Facebook and Twitter, because it's really not worth it. Every click that you make on that website, every tweet that goes out is contributing to their revenue. They need people creating content and using their site to continue to make a lot of money. If we leave, they're going to lose money. And that's something they'll listen to. They're not going to listen to a Senate hearing or a congressional hearing that has no real teeth. What they're going to listen to is people, boots on the ground, just leaving, voting with their dollars.
Mm-hmm. John Matze, CEO of Parler, thanks for joining me today.
Thank you. Take care.
This is the Kyle Olson Show. We'll be right back.